I stepped off the military transport, the desert heat slapping me in the face after the artificial chill of the cabin. The plane had been small, utilitarian, with none of the comforts of commercial travel. The tarmac beneath my feet was cracked and weathered, stretching out to meet the vast Nevada desert. A man waited beside a black SUV, flanked by 2 soldiers carrying assault rifles. He wore a white lab coat despite the heat, his ID badge catching the sunlight. As I approached, he extended his hand. "Dr. Harrison, I'm Dr. James Chen." His handshake was firm, perfunctory. His eyes gave away nothing behind rimless glasses. "Call me Michael," I said, adjusting the strap of my medical bag. "Mind telling me why I was pulled from my hospital at 4 in the morning and put on a military transport?" Chen looked at me with clinical detachment. "Your expertise is needed for a medical emergency. That's all I can share until we reach the facility." The armed escorts didn't introduce themselves. They simply opened the vehicle doors, one taking my bag and placing it in the trunk with mechanical efficiency. I climbed into the backseat beside Chen while the escorts took positions in front and behind us in separate vehicles. "How far are we going?" I asked as we pulled away from the airstrip. "About an hour," Chen replied, his attention on a tablet in his lap. "I suggest you rest while you can, Dr. Harrison." The convoy moved through empty desert roads. Miles of sand and scrub brush passed by the window. No signs, no mile markers, no indication of where we were or where we were heading. I checked my phone out of habit. No signal. The device might as well have been a paperweight. "Your phone won't work out here," Chen said without looking up. "Security protocol." The sun climbed higher as we drove, baking the landscape. No other vehicles passed us. The isolation was deliberate, I realized. Whatever was happening, they wanted it contained and hidden from public view. After what felt longer than an hour, a structure appeared on the horizon. As we drew closer, I made out a concrete compound surrounded by razor wire fencing at least 15 feet high. Guard towers stood at each corner, and I spotted snipers tracking our approach. "What the hell is this place?" I murmured. Chen finally looked up from his tablet. "A research facility. That's all you need to know for now." We passed through 3 separate checkpoints, each more heavily armed than the last. At the final gate, guards inspected underneath our vehicle with mirrors before waving us through. The compound itself was a windowless concrete structure, brutalist in design, with satellite dishes and communication arrays on the roof. The interior air was cold and antiseptic, the lighting harsh fluorescent. Our footsteps echoed on polished floors as Chen led me through a reception area that looked nothing like a reception area. No chairs, no magazines, just a reinforced desk behind bulletproof glass where we surrendered our IDs and signed digital forms. "Dr. Harrison." A woman approached us, her military uniform pressed to perfection. Captain's bars gleamed on her shoulders. Her honey blonde hair was pulled back in a tight bun, not a strand out of place. "Captain Sarah Mitchell," she said, her handshake firm. "I'll take you from here, Dr. Chen." Chen nodded and left without another word, his shoes clicking down the hallway until he disappeared around a corner. "Walk with me, Doctor," Mitchell said, not waiting for a response. I followed her through sterile hallways lined with surveillance cameras. Every 20 feet, a red light blinked above our heads, tracking our movement. "You've been briefed on containment protocols?" she asked. "No, I haven't been briefed on anything," I replied. "I was told there's a medical emergency requiring my expertise, but that's it." Mitchell stopped walking, her expression tightening. Dr. Chen was supposed to explain the basics during transit. She sighed. "We have 3 patients requiring immediate attention. They're in isolation for their own protection." "What's wrong with them?" I asked. "That's what you're here to determine," she said, resuming her pace. "What I can tell you is that standard procedures don't apply. You'll observe through the containment window first. Direct contact only with full protective gear and my express authorization." The facility felt more like a prison than a hospital. Each junction required Mitchell to swipe a key card and submit to a retinal scan. Metal doors slid open with pneumatic hisses, revealing more corridors identical to the ones we'd left behind. White walls, white floors, no windows. The air tasted recycled. "How long have the patients been here?" I asked, trying to fill the silence. "The first admission was 6 months ago," Mitchell said. "The other 2 followed within days." Family members? Yes. She offered nothing more, and I didn't press. Whatever was happening here, the military wanted it contained. My job was to treat patients, not question security protocols. We passed rooms filled with monitoring equipment, screens displaying vital signs that made no sense, heartbeats too slow to sustain life, body temperatures fluctuating wildly. Lab technicians in white coats looked up as we passed, their expressions guarded. Mitchell stopped at a freight elevator at the end of the hall and swiped her keycard. The doors opened with a groan. "The patients are in the basement level," she explained, handing me a hazmat suit from a locker beside the elevator. "For their protection and yours." I took the suit, running my fingers over the thick material. "This is military grade. What am I walking into, Captain?" "A situation that requires your medical expertise and discretion," she said, helping me into the suit. "These patients exhibit symptoms unlike anything in medical literature." As the elevator descended, I noticed Mitchell's hand resting on her sidearm, her fingers trembling slightly. The tremor was barely perceptible, but it spoke volumes. Whatever waited below frightened her, and Mitchell didn't strike me as someone easily frightened. The elevator doors opened to reveal a corridor painted institutional green, the floor and walls splattered with dark brown stains. Dried blood. A lot of it. "This way," Mitchell said, her voice slightly muffled through my suit's audio system. She led me to a reinforced steel door at the end of the corridor. A small observation window was set into the metal at eye level. Mitchell gestured for me to look. I stepped forward and peered through the glass. The room beyond was large and clinical, with medical equipment pushed to the walls. In the center, a man lay in a massive pool of congealed blood. His legs were completely gone, but not in any way I recognized from trauma medicine. There were no ragged stumps, no signs of surgical amputation. Instead, thick green tendrils grew from his exposed abdomen, pulsing with a rhythm independent of his breathing. The man's eyes were open, alert. They locked onto mine through the glass, and I saw recognition there, not of me personally, but of what I represented. Help, perhaps, or judgment. I pulled back from the window, my medical training battling with instinctive revulsion. Whatever was happening to this man defied everything I knew about human physiology. "What the hell is this?" I whispered. Mitchell's eyes never left the door. "That's Vincent Ortiz. He's been like that for 6 months, Dr. Harrison. He should have died within hours from blood loss alone." "That's impossible," I said, looking again through the window. The green tendrils pulsed with their own circulation system. "No human could survive this." "That's why you're here," Mitchell said, "because whatever Mr. Ortiz is becoming, it isn't human anymore." I stood in the preparation area outside the containment room, letting Captain Mitchell help me into the full biohazard suit. The rubber seals pinched at my wrists and ankles as Mitchell checked each closure with methodical precision. "Once you're inside, stay at least 3 feet from the subject at all times," she said, her voice tight. "We'll be monitoring your vitals remotely. If anything spikes, we pull you out immediately." "The subject has a name," I reminded her. "Vincent Ortiz." Mitchell's hands paused for a fraction of a second before resuming their work. Keeping emotional distance is protocol in these situations. "I'm a doctor. My patients have names." She didn't argue, just handed me a medical tablet encased in sealed plastic. "All his readings are on here, though I should warn you, they won't make sense." The past 20 minutes had been a blur of briefings and preparations. I'd been told almost nothing of substance, just endless warnings and protocols. Mitchell finished sealing my suit and stepped back to inspect her work. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded, my breath already fogging the faceplate. The suit was military grade, far heavier than anything I'd worn for infectious disease protocols at my hospital. The weight of it told me more about what I was facing than any of Mitchell's evasive briefings. 2 armed guards flanked the door as Mitchell swiped her keycard. The heavy steel barrier slid open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing the room I'd glimpsed through the observation window. The smell hit me immediately, even through the filtered air of my suit. Copper and something else, something green and alive like wet moss but sharper. Vincent Ortiz lay in the center of the room. The pool of congealed blood around him had been partially cleaned, but dark stains remained on the concrete floor. Medical equipment surrounded him, heart monitors, oxygen tanks, IV stands, though none appeared to be connected to him. His eyes found mine the moment I entered. They were alert, intelligent, filled with a clarity that contradicted his physical state. The green tendrils emerging from his abdomen pulsed with a rhythm independent of his breathing. They writhed slowly, like underwater plants caught in a gentle current. "Dr. Harrison," Mitchell's voice came through the comm unit in my helmet. "You have 15 minutes." The door sealed behind me with a definitive click. I approached Vincent slowly, medical training fighting against instinctive revulsion. The tablet in my hand displayed his vitals. Heart rate 20 beats per minute, blood pressure 70/40, temperature 95 degrees, numbers incompatible with life. "Mr. Ortiz," I said, crouching down beside him, maintaining the 3-foot distance Mitchell had insisted upon. "I'm Dr. Michael Harrison. Can you understand me?" Vincent's lips curved into something resembling a smile. "Perfectly," he said, his voice surprisingly strong. "Though I'm afraid I can't stand to shake your hand." Dark humor in the face of catastrophic injury. I'd seen it before in trauma patients, a defense mechanism against overwhelming horror. "I need to examine you," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Can you tell me what happened to you?" Vincent's eyes never left mine. "You mean this?" He gestured toward the green tendrils where his legs should have been. "It would be easier to show you." Before I could react, his arm shot out with startling speed. His hand clamped around my wrist with strength that shouldn't have been possible given his condition. The tablet clattered to the floor. "Breach! We have a breach!" Mitchell's voice exploded through my comm. "It's fine," I said quickly, fighting the urge to pull away. "He's just holding my wrist. No breach of the suit." Vincent's grip remained firm but didn't tighten. "Tell them to stand down, Doctor. I just need you to listen." I nodded to the observation window where I knew Mitchell would be watching. "Hold position, Captain. I'm not in danger." The comm went silent, but I knew they were poised to intervene. Vincent released my wrist slowly, deliberately showing he meant no harm. "My name is Dr. Vincent Ortiz," he said, former researcher at Area 51's Bioweapons Division. I maintained my professional demeanor despite the mention of the infamous location. "You worked for the military?" "Not exactly. I worked for a private contractor that operated within military parameters. We were tasked with analyzing potential biological weapons, both terrestrial and—" He paused, watching my face. "Non-terrestrial." The implications hung in the air between us. I kept my expression neutral, though my pulse quickened. "Go on." 18 months ago, my team recovered an object from a crash site near Tonopah, about 150 miles northwest of here. A metallic cube, approximately 6 inches on each side, made of a material we couldn't identify. Vincent's breathing remained steady as he spoke, though it should have been labored given his condition. The green tendrils continued their hypnotic pulsing. The cube emitted radiation unlike anything in our catalogs, not harmful, at least not in any way our instruments could detect, but definitely alien to Earth's physics. "And you were assigned to study it?" I asked, glancing at the monitors. His vitals remained impossibly stable. Vincent nodded. "To determine its composition and function, if possible. We made little progress for months. The material resisted all conventional analysis." His eyes drifted, focusing on something beyond the room. "One night I stayed late. Everyone else had gone home. I was running an unauthorized test series, trying different energy frequencies to see if I could trigger a response. I leaned closer, forgetting Mitchell's 3-foot rule. What happened? I found the right frequency." Vincent's laugh held no humor. "The cube opened, for lack of a better term. Not physically. There were no seams or hinges. It simply changed state, released a pulse of energy, then exploded. Embedded microscopic shards throughout my body." He gestured to his abdomen where the green growth emerged. "At first, nothing happened. The medical team removed the visible fragments, but thousands remained, too small to detect with our imaging technology. I was cleared to return home after 3 days of observation." Vincent's hand moved to touch one of the tendrils. The appendage responded, curling around his fingers like a pet seeking affection. The first changes were subtle. Increased stamina, decreased appetite. Then came the pain, burning pain that started in my gut and spread outward. Within days, the metal fragments began rewriting my DNA, creating this. He gestured to the parasitic growth. Up close, I could see the tendrils weren't simply plant-like appendages. They contained structures resembling arteries and veins, carrying a dark green fluid instead of blood. "You hid your condition?" I asked. Vincent nodded. "For weeks. I was frightened, but also fascinated. From a scientific perspective, it was revolutionary, a complete rewriting of human cellular structure. I documented everything, thinking I could control it, study it." His expression darkened. By the time I realized I couldn't hide it anymore, it was too late. I'd already infected Maria and Isabella, my wife and daughter. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Through physical contact? Prolonged proximity was enough. The infection spreads through microscopic particles shed from my skin, my breath. They didn't show symptoms immediately. I did. This happened quickly once it started progressing. He indicated his lower body. But by the time I turned myself in, they were both carrying the contagion. I checked the timer on my suit. 8 minutes remained of my allocated 15. "And the government brought all 3 of you here?" "6 months ago. They quarantined us separately, but it was already too late. Maria and Isabella's transformations accelerated beyond mine. Their biology was different, more susceptible to the changes somehow." Vincent's eyes filled with tears. "I watched them on the monitors they installed in here. My wife and daughter, they're not human anymore, doctor. Not in any way you'd recognize." I glanced toward the observation window. "Captain Mitchell mentioned 3 patients. Are they the other 2? Vincent nodded. "My family is still here, but they're not my family anymore. Whatever this infection is, it seems to have a purpose. It's not random mutation, it's directed evolution, changing us into something else entirely." "For what purpose?" I asked. "That's what I need you to help me figure out." Vincent's voice dropped to a whisper. "Before it's too late for everyone." The comm unit in my helmet crackled to life. "Dr. Harrison, your time is up," Mitchell said. "Please exit the containment area immediately." I looked down at Vincent, his body destroyed yet somehow still functioning. The green tendrils pulsed with alien life, keeping him alive through means I couldn't begin to comprehend. "I'll be back," I promised quietly. Vincent's eyes held mine. "Hurry, doctor. I don't think we have much time left." As I turned to leave, Vincent called after me. "One more thing, doctor." I paused at the door. "Don't trust anything they tell you about my family. See them for yourself. You need to understand what we're dealing with." The door slid open, and I stepped through into the preparation area where Mitchell waited. As the decontamination procedure began, spraying the suit with chemicals that stung my eyes even through the faceplate, I couldn't shake the image of Vincent lying there, half man, half something else, his eyes clear with terrible knowledge. Whatever had begun in that lab 18 months ago was still unfolding, and I had a sinking feeling that Vincent was right. We were running out of time. 2 hours passed as Vincent detailed the progression of his condition. I sat on the edge of a metal stool the guards had brought in, recording notes on the tablet while Vincent explained the cellular changes he'd documented before turning himself in. His scientific mind remained intact despite his transformation, methodically breaking down complex biochemical processes with remarkable clarity. "The integration begins at the mitochondrial level," he said, gesturing to the green tendrils where his legs should have been. "The foreign material doesn't destroy human cells so much as repurpose them. It's elegant, really. If it weren't happening to me, I'd..." A shrill alarm cut through the air, red emergency lights flashing along the ceiling. Vincent went silent, his eyes darting to the observation window. "What's that?" I asked, rising from the stool. "Nothing good," Vincent replied, his voice tightening. The facility's intercom crackled to life. "All personnel to defensive positions immediately." Captain Mitchell's voice was controlled but urgent. "This is not a drill. Repeat, all personnel to defensive positions." I moved to the observation window, watching as guards ran past in the corridor outside, assault rifles ready. Their faces were grim, determined. Whatever was happening, they'd been prepared for it, or at least had protocols in place. "They're coming," Vincent said quietly behind me. I turned back to him. "Who's coming?" Vincent's eyes fixed on mine. "The infected, the ones we created. We. My family, though I suppose I'm the source." His gaze drifted to the ceiling, tracking the alarm's flashing lights. Maria and Isabella are kept in separate containment wings, level 4 for Maria, level 5 for Isabella. Why different levels? Different stages of infection. Vincent's hand reached out, beckoning me closer. What they didn't understand, what I tried to tell them, is that physical separation isn't enough anymore. I approached, careful to maintain the 3-foot distance protocol. What do you mean? The infection has evolved beyond physical contact. Vincent pointed to a vent near the ceiling. It spreads through microscopic spores released when the infected experience stress or aggression. The facility's ventilation system has been circulating these spores for weeks despite the HEPA filters. My eyes went to the vent, then to my hazmat suit. I'd assumed it was protection against whatever was happening to Vincent, but if what he was saying was true, the real threat was airborne, potentially throughout the entire facility. Vincent's arm shot out suddenly, grabbing my wrist with surprising strength. I started to pull away, but he was pointing urgently at something behind me. "Look," he said, directing my attention to a security monitor mounted on the wall. The screen showed the facility's main entrance from an exterior camera. Dozens of people approached the compound's perimeter fence, their movements stiff and uncoordinated. They walked with jerky gaits, some dragging limbs, others moving with unnatural fluidity. Behind them, more figures emerged from the desert darkness. "Who are they?" I asked. "Goldfield," Vincent replied. "The nearest town. Population 273 as of last census, though I doubt that number still applies." The camera view switched to another angle, showing Captain Mitchell organizing a defensive line at the main gate. Her soldiers took positions behind concrete barriers, weapons trained on the approaching crowd. They've been infected, I realized aloud. But how? Early-stage carriers could have visited the town, gas station attendants, supply deliveries, shift workers living off base. Vincent's eyes never left the monitor. Or perhaps someone from my containment team carried spores on their clothing, in their lungs. It doesn't take much. On screen, Mitchell raised a bullhorn. Though we couldn't hear her words, her intent was clear. Warning the crowd to stop advancing, they kept coming. "They're not choosing to come here," Vincent said. "Not consciously. They're drawn by biological imperative to the source." He tapped his chest. "To me and to Maria and Isabella. The infection has a hive structure. The hosts are compelled to protect and unite with progenitors." The first wave of infected reached the perimeter fence. Instead of attempting to climb it or break through, they simply pressed against it, bodies piling up as more pushed forward from behind. The fence began to bow inward under their collective weight. Mitchell gave an order, and her team opened fire. I flinched as bullets tore through the crowd. Bodies fell, but the press of infected continued unabated. Those behind simply climbed over their fallen, still pushing toward the fence. "My God," I whispered. Vincent nodded grimly. "Keep watching." One man at the fence took multiple rounds to the chest, but remained standing. Another lost an arm to concentrated fire, yet continued pressing forward with his remaining limb. A third took a shotgun blast to the head. The upper portion of his skull disappeared in a red mist, but his body kept moving, hands still gripping the fence. "That's not possible," I said, medical training rebelling against what I was seeing. "The infection rewires the nervous system," Vincent explained. "It creates a secondary neural network through the tendril structures, allowing the host to function despite massive trauma. Conventional attack methods are ineffective once the infection reaches stage 2. On screen, the fence gave way. The infected poured through the breach while Mitchell's team fell back toward the building, still firing. The camera feed cut to static. "They're not prepared for this," Vincent said. "The guards are trained for human threats, armed incursions, espionage, not a biological nightmare spreading through rural Nevada." The alarms seemed louder now, more insistent. Through the observation window, I could see fewer personnel running past. Most had already reached their defensive positions wherever those were. "What about you?" I asked, turning back to Vincent. "If these infected are drawn to you as their source, why aren't you trying to escape?" Vincent's laugh was bitter. "Look at me, Doctor. Where would I go?" He gestured to his lower body, the massive tendrils pulsing with their alien rhythm. "Besides, I'm the one who started this. I should be the one to end it." "End it how?" Before Vincent could answer, the facility lights flickered, then stabilized, emergency generators kicking in. They've breached the main building, Vincent said, his voice oddly calm. They'll work their way down, level by level. Their primary objective will be to free Maria and Isabella. Their secondary objective will be to protect me. The intercom crackled again. All non-combat personnel proceed to basement level immediately. Security breach on levels 1 through 3. This is not a drill. I looked at the door, then back at Vincent. What happens if they reach you? Vincent's eyes met mine, his expression resigned. I don't know. This is uncharted territory, but I suspect it won't end well for anyone still human in this facility. The sound of distant gunfire reached us, muffled by concrete and steel, but unmistakable. Single shots and bursts of automatic weapons fire, punctuated by what might have been screams. You should find Captain Mitchell, Vincent said urgently. The infection can't spread through conventional weapons fire. No blood splatter risk. But anyone bitten or scratched by a late-stage infected will turn within hours. What about you? I asked. I'll be fine. The infected won't harm me. His eyes held mine. Go, doctor. Find Mitchell. She at least has a plan, even if it's not a good one. I hesitated, my medical training warring with self-preservation. Leaving a patient went against everything I believed, but Vincent wasn't just a patient anymore. He was the source of whatever biological catastrophe was unfolding around us. The elevator, Vincent said, pointing to the corridor. Take it to level 1. Mitchell will have established a fallback position in the operations center. Another burst of gunfire, closer this time. The battle was moving deeper into the facility. Go, Vincent repeated, while you still can. I backed toward the door, my eyes on Vincent until the last moment. As I stepped into the corridor, the red emergency lights cast everything in a bloody glow. The basement level was eerily quiet compared to the chaos above. Through the observation window, Vincent watched me, his expression unreadable. The green tendrils pulsed faster than before, as if responding to the proximity of others like them. Whatever was happening to Vincent Ortiz wasn't just destroying his body, it was transforming him into something else entirely, something with a purpose I could only begin to comprehend. I turned and ran toward the elevator, leaving Vincent alone with the monster he was becoming. I raced down the corridor toward the elevator, the red emergency lights casting everything in a bloody glow. The distant sounds of gunfire and screams echoed through the facility's concrete walls. When I reached the elevator, I jabbed the call button repeatedly, then remembered Vincent's words about heading to level 1, where Captain Mitchell would likely have established a fallback position. The elevator arrived with a soft ping that felt absurdly normal amid the chaos. I stepped inside and pressed the button for level 1, my breath coming in quick bursts inside the hazmat suit. As the doors closed, cutting off the alarm's wail, I had a moment of eerie silence. The elevator hummed as it ascended, and I tried to process what Vincent had told me. An alien infection spreading through rural Nevada, people being transformed into something not human. And at the center of it all, Vincent Ortiz and his family, patient zero of whatever biological nightmare was unfolding. The doors opened to reveal a scene of controlled chaos. The operations center was a large room filled with monitoring equipment, communication stations, and tactical displays. Military personnel rushed between stations, their voices tense but disciplined. Captain Mitchell stood at a central table, leaning over a facility schematic, issuing orders into a radio headset. She looked up as I entered, her expression hardening. Harrison, what are you doing up here? You should be in containment. Vincent told me to find you, I said, approaching the table. He said you'd have a plan. Mitchell's laugh held no humor. A plan? We're fighting an enemy we don't understand, can't kill and can't contain. My plan is to hold them off as long as possible while we wait for evac. I glanced at the monitors lining the walls. They showed various areas of the facility, corridors, laboratories, the main entrance. On several screens, figures moved with jerky, unnatural motions. Guards fired at them, bullets tearing through flesh without slowing their advance. How many? I asked. Mitchell turned back to the schematic. Initial count was 78 infected from Goldfield. We've neutralized. She paused. Damaged 23 of them, but they keep coming. And now we have internal problems. Maria and Isabella, I said. Mitchell's head snapped up. Ortiz told you about them? I nodded. He said they were in the late stages of infection. Mitchell gestured to one of the technicians, who pulled up a different view on the main screen. It showed a containment cell much like Vincent's, but empty. The reinforced door had been torn from its hinges from the inside. Maria Ortiz breached containment at 1943, Mitchell said. Isabella followed at 1957. We think they sensed the approach of the other infected and responded to it. Vincent said they work with a hive structure, I said. The infected are drawn to the source, to him and his family. Mitchell nodded grimly. That tracks with what we've seen. The civilians from Goldfield arrived at the perimeter fence less than 20 minutes after Maria escaped. This wasn't random. It was coordinated. One of the communications officers called out from his station. Captain, we've lost contact with teams 3 and 4. Last transmission put them on level 3, East Wing. Mitchell turned to the facility schematic, marking off sections with a red grease pencil. That means the entire upper level is compromised. Begin Phase 2 retreat. Orders went out across the radio network. Guards began falling back to predetermined positions, creating choke points in the facility's narrow corridors. The strategy was clear: delay the infected long enough for help to arrive. What about evacuation? I asked. Mitchell kept her eyes on the monitors. Working on it. Nellis Air Force Base is scrambling a response team, but they're at least 90 minutes out. A new alarm sounded, different from the breach alert. 3 short bursts followed by a long tone. What's that? I asked. Ventilation system compromise, Mitchell said, her voice tightening. She turned to a technician. Shut down all air handlers immediately. Seal the fire doors between sections. The technician's fingers flew across his keyboard. System's not responding, Captain. Someone's overridden the protocols from a terminal on level 3. Mitchell slammed her fist on the table. They're learning, using our systems against us. The operations center fell silent, the implications sinking in. These weren't mindless infected. They were being directed, using strategy. How long until midnight? Mitchell asked. A technician checked his watch. 23 minutes, Captain. Mitchell nodded, as if confirming something to herself. At midnight, we implement final containment if evac hasn't arrived. Make sure everyone knows the fallback points. The phrase, final containment, hung in the air, its meaning clear even to me. They had a scorched earth protocol. Whatever was happening here wouldn't be allowed to spread beyond the facility's walls. For the next 4 hours, I stayed in the operations center, watching the systematic collapse of the facility's defenses. Mitchell coordinated her remaining teams with grim efficiency, but it was a losing battle. The infected moved through the building with disturbing coordination, finding pathways the guards hadn't secured. By midnight, the outer defenses had fallen. The infected were inside the main building, moving through corridors, ventilation shafts, and maintenance tunnels. I listened to the radio chatter as Mitchell coordinated a retreat to the facility's inner sections. Team 6, fall back to position Delta, Mitchell ordered into her headset. Team 2, hold the east corridor for 3 minutes, then join them. Static-filled responses came back, some calm, others frantic. The guard force was being whittled down, position by position. Vincent's voice came from the speaker of a phone Mitchell had placed on the table. They'd patched him in from his containment room, using his knowledge of the infection to try to predict its spread. They'll target the power generators next, Vincent said. The infection gives them a heightened sensitivity to electromagnetic fields. They can sense the current. Mitchell nodded to a technician, who relayed orders to reinforce the generator room. I leaned closer to the phone. Vincent, what exactly are we facing here? You said Maria and Isabella aren't human anymore. What does that mean? Vincent's voice was tired but clinically precise. The infection progresses through stages. I'm still in the early phase, partial transformation, cognitive functions intact. Maria reached stage 3 approximately 2 months ago. Isabella progressed to stage 4 last week. And what does stage 4 look like? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. Look at monitor 6, Vincent said quietly. Mitchell nodded to a technician who brought up the feed on the main screen. It showed the facility's kitchen, industrial stainless steel counters and equipment, now abandoned. For a moment, the room appeared empty. Then, something moved in the shadows. A figure stepped into view, and I felt my stomach tighten. It had once been a teenage girl. That much was clear from the general shape and proportions. but Isabella Ortiz had been transformed into something nightmarish. Her body had elongated unnaturally, limbs stretched like branches. Green tendrils covered her skin, pulsing with the same alien rhythm I'd seen in Vincent. Her fingers had changed too, extended into what looked like razor-sharp thorns. She moved with fluid grace, her head tilting as if listening for something. 3 guards entered the kitchen from the opposite side, weapons raised. They hadn't seen her yet. "They need to get out of there," Vincent said urgently through the phone. "Now!" Mitchell grabbed her radio. "Team 4, immediate withdrawal from the mess hall. Hostile presence confirmed." The guards on screen received the message too late. Isabella's head snapped toward them, and she moved with blinding speed. One moment she was across the room, the next she was among them. Her thorn-like fingers tore through body armor as if it were paper. One guard got off a single shot before she ripped the weapon from his hands and drove her transformed fingers into his chest. I turned away from the screen, bile rising in my throat. "Stage 4 transforms hosts into living weapons," Vincent explained, his voice clinically detached despite the horror we'd just witnessed. "Their only purpose is to spread the contamination. They retain enough intelligence to use strategy, but none of their human personality or restraint." "And Maria?" I asked, forcing myself to look back at the monitors. "Similar, but more developed. Stage 5 involves a complete rejection of human form. She's essentially a mobile colony now, a massive infection capable of dividing and reintegrating at will." A new transmission crackled over the radio, Mitchell's face tightening as she listened. "This is Captain Mitchell. Report status." Her voice was controlled, professional. Sarah's voice came through, breathless and strained. "Half my team is down. We're pinned on level 2, West Corridor, requesting immediate evacuation." Mitchell tried to respond, but only static answered her. She switched channels, tried again with the same result. "Communications are being jammed," the technician reported. "We've lost contact with the outside." I looked at Mitchell. "What about the evacuation team from Nellis?" Her expression told me everything I needed to know before she spoke. "They should have been here an hour ago." Vincent's voice came through the phone speaker, grim and resigned. "They're not coming," Mitchell glared at the phone. "You don't know that, Ortiz." "I know exactly how this works, Captain," Vincent replied. "The government will never risk this spreading to Las Vegas or beyond. This facility was designed with fail-safes. When those fail-safes activate, and they will, nothing within these walls will survive." The operations center fell silent, the only sounds the static from the radios and the soft beeping of monitoring equipment. "He's right," Mitchell finally said. She straightened, addressing her remaining personnel. "New orders. All teams fall back to Central Command. We're consolidating our remaining forces." As the guards began to comply, I moved closer to Mitchell. "What now?" She checked her sidearm, her face expressionless. "Now we hold out as long as we can and hope someone up the chain of command decides we're worth saving." Vincent's voice came through the phone again, quiet but clear. "They won't, Captain. You know that. We're on our own and this facility is becoming a tomb." Mitchell didn't argue. Instead, she turned to me. "Dr. Harrison, I'm sending you back to Vincent. You'll be safer in the basement level. It has the heaviest security measures." "What about you and your team?" I asked. "We'll hold them here as long as possible." Her eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw past her military bearing to the fear beneath. "If you survive?" The operations center monitors went dark one by one as systems throughout the facility began to fail. Each blank screen represented another section lost to the infected. Mitchell had maintained her composure until the last of her team fell back to our position, their numbers reduced to less than a third of the original security force. "Dr. Harrison," Mitchell said, checking her rifle magazine before slapping it back into place, "you need to return to the basement level." "What?" I looked around at the chaos of the command center. "We should stay together." Mitchell shook her head. "My orders are to protect this facility and prevent spread of the contagion. You're not combat trained." She nodded to one of her remaining guards. "Peterson will escort you back to Vincent. The basement has the heaviest security measures in the building." I wanted to argue, but the cold determination in her eyes stopped me. "What about you and your team?" "We'll hold here as long as we can." She grabbed a radio from the desk. "Take this. I'll contact you if—" She didn't finish the sentence. Peterson guided me through back corridors I hadn't seen before, moving with practiced efficiency. We descended through service stairwells rather than using the elevator, his flashlight beam cutting through the emergency-lit hallways. The distant sounds of combat echoed through the facility's concrete walls, gunfire, shouting, and other noises I couldn't identify. "Almost there," Peterson whispered as we reached the basement level. He swiped his keycard at Vincent's containment room, the green light flashing as the door unlocked. "Good luck, Doc." Before I could respond, he was already retreating back up the stairs, the beam of his flashlight growing fainter until it disappeared entirely. Vincent looked up as I entered, his eyes questioning. "Mitchell sent you back?" "She thought I'd be safer down here." I pulled off my hazmat helmet, the containment protocols seeming pointless now. "She's making a last stand at the operations center with what's left of her team." Vincent nodded solemnly. "Smart move. This room was designed to withstand almost anything." He gestured to the walls. 2 feet of reinforced concrete lined with steel. The door is triple locked with independent systems. I set the radio on a nearby counter. "How long can they hold out up there?" "Not long enough," Vincent said. "You've seen what Maria and Isabella have become. The civilian infected are nothing compared to them." For the next several hours, we monitored the situation through the radio. Mitchell's updates grew increasingly grim as her position was slowly overwhelmed. The infected moved with disturbing coordination, finding pathways through the facility's defenses that shouldn't have been possible for mindless creatures. "They're not mindless," Vincent explained when I mentioned this. "The infection grants a kind of collective intelligence. They share information, learn from failures, adapt strategies." At 2 in the morning, Mitchell's voice came through the radio one last time. "Harrison, if you're receiving this, stay put. We've lost the main." Her voice cut off in a burst of static. "Sarah?" I grabbed the radio. "Captain Mitchell, do you copy?" Nothing but static answered. Vincent looked at me, his expression grim. "They've reached the operations center." An hour later, at 3 in the morning, 7 hours into the siege, the first lock on the basement door failed with a loud mechanical click. Vincent's head snapped toward the sound. "That wasn't supposed to happen," he said, his voice unnaturally calm. "The locks are independent systems." The second lock disengaged with another click. "They're coming." Vincent dragged himself toward a storage locker across the room, his tendrils leaving smears of dark fluid on the floor. "Help me barricade the door. It won't stop them, but it might buy us time." I pushed the heavy medical equipment against the door, a monitoring station, a crash cart, anything I could move. Above us, the facility had gone silent. No more gunfire, no radio chatter, no sounds of combat. The silence felt more ominous than the chaos that had preceded it. The third lock failed as I finished building the makeshift barricade. Vincent had reached the storage locker and was rummaging inside. He pulled out something I hadn't expected, a military-grade incendiary grenade. "Where did you get that?" I asked, backing away. "I hid it months ago." Vincent turned the grenade over in his hands. "I always knew this day would come." "What are you planning to do?" Vincent's eyes met mine. "The infected will be drawn to me as their progenitor. It's biological programming. They're compelled to protect the source of the infection." He nodded toward a section of the wall I hadn't noticed before. "See that panel? It's a morgue drawer built into the wall, lead-lined to prevent radiation leakage during certain tests." I crossed to the wall, finding the handle and pulling. The drawer slid out smoothly, revealing a space just large enough for a person. "Get inside," Vincent said. "The infected won't sense you through the lead lining." I hesitated. "What about you?" Vincent held up the grenade. "I'm going to end this. It's the only way." "Vincent!" "No, it's already decided." His voice held no room for argument. "I started this. I infected my family. I let it spread to that town. This is on me." Something slammed against the door, making the barricade shudder. Another impact followed, stronger than the first. "Get in the drawer," Vincent ordered. "Now." I climbed inside the cold metal compartment, its dimensions tight but not suffocating. Vincent dragged himself closer, his tendrils pulsing faster than I'd seen before. "Close it most of the way, but leave it cracked so you can breathe and see what happens." His face had taken on an almost peaceful expression. "You need to witness this. Someone has to know the truth." The barricade gave way with a crash of metal and plastic. The basement door burst open, and Maria entered first. I had to stifle a gasp at the sight of her. Whatever had once been a woman was now barely recognizable as human. She'd become a mass of writhing plant matter with only a vague feminine shape. The green tendrils that had consumed Vincent's lower body had completely overtaken Maria, leaving just hints of a human face within the mass. Behind her came Isabella, the teenage girl transformed into the predatory creature I'd seen on the monitors. Her elongated limbs moved with fluid grace, thorn-like fingers flexing as she entered. Following them were dozens of infected civilians, men and women from Goldfield, their transformations less advanced but still horrifying. Green tendrils erupted from tears in their clothing, their movements jerky but purposeful. They surrounded Vincent, forming a circle in the center of the room. Their tendrils reached out, intertwining with his in some grotesque reunion. Vincent didn't resist. He allowed the infected to touch him, their tendrils pulsing in unison as if communicating. From my hiding place, I could see Vincent's face. He showed no fear, only a strange sort of acceptance. His eyes scanned the room, taking in the infected, his wife, his daughter, the people he'd inadvertently doomed. Then his gaze shifted, looking directly at the drawer where I hid. Our eyes met through the narrow opening. Vincent gave me the slightest nod, then pulled the grenade's pin. The explosion shook the entire facility. A wall of heat and light erupted from the center of the room. I slammed the drawer shut just as the blast wave hit, but even through the lead lining and insulation, I felt the intense heat. The roar was deafening, like standing next to a jet engine. The drawer rattled violently, and for a terrible second, I thought it might come loose from the wall. Then came silence, broken only by the soft crackle of flames and the distant sound of collapsing infrastructure. The heat gradually lessened, but I remained motionless in the dark, confined space, afraid to open the drawer and face what remained of the containment room. Vincent was gone. Maria, Isabella, and all the infected who had surrounded him were gone too. And I was alone, sealed in a metal box, listening to the facility burn around me. I counted the seconds in the darkness of the morgue drawer, then the minutes, then the hours. The metal box that had saved my life became my prison, trapping heat and the smell of my own sweat and fear. The lead lining that had protected me from the blast now cut me off from the world outside. I didn't know if anyone was coming. I kept the drawer cracked just enough to allow fresh air to seep in. Through that narrow opening, I could see only a slice of the containment room, charred walls, debris, and occasionally flames flickering across my limited field of vision. The explosion had been massive, consuming everything in its path. Hours passed, my muscles cramped from the confined space. Thirst clawed at my throat. I drifted in and out of consciousness, the trauma of the night's events catching up with me in waves of exhaustion. A noise jolted me awake, metal scraping against metal, voices muffled but human. I wanted to call out, but caution kept me silent. What if the infection had survived? What if new infected had found their way to the facility? The voices grew closer. Flashlight beams cut through the smoky air, visible through the crack of the drawer. I saw legs moving through the debris, human legs in hazmat suits, not the twisted limbs of the infected. "Sweep complete," a voice called out. "No survivors detected." "Negative readings on all bioscanners," another replied. I pushed against the drawer, my muscles too weak to open it fully. "Here," I croaked, my voice barely audible. "I'm in here." The flashlight beam swung toward the wall. "Movement detected. East wall storage unit." Heavy footsteps approached. The drawer opened with a metallic groan, and I squinted against the sudden light. 3 figures in full hazmat suits stood over me, their faces obscured behind tinted visors. "We have a live one," the central figure said, his voice coldly professional. I tried to sit up. "I'm Dr. Michael Harrison. I was brought here to secure the subject," the figure interrupted, not addressing me but his team. Gloved hands reached for me, pulling me from the drawer. My legs buckled as they set me on my feet, muscles screaming after hours of confinement. I looked around at what remained of the containment room. The walls were charred black, the ceiling partially collapsed. Nothing remained of Vincent or the infected. No bodies, no blood, just ash and debris. The grenade had done its work thoroughly. "What time is it?" I asked, my voice hoarse. 900 hours, one of the hazmat team replied. 9 in the morning. I'd been in that drawer for 6 hours. The team leader stepped forward, studying me through his visor. "I am Control," he said, offering no name, no rank, just a designation. "You will be taken to a secure facility for decontamination and debriefing." "The infection," I began. "Did you find any?" Control raised a hand, cutting me off. "All information is classified at this time." He turned to one of his team members. "Prepare him for transport." A hazmat-suited figure approached with a syringe. I tried to step back, but my legs were too weak. "This is just a precaution," Control said, watching as the needle slid into my arm. "For your safety and ours." The sedative worked quickly. The room began to spin, the charred walls blurring together. My last thought before darkness claimed me was of Vincent's face in those final moments, serene, resolved, a man who had found peace in the act of ending what he had begun. I woke to sterile white. The ceiling above me was a smooth expanse of white tiles. The walls around me were white panels. Even the bed beneath me was covered in white sheets. For a moment, I wondered if I had died in that basement after all. A glass wall formed one side of the room, revealing a corridor beyond. Through it, I could see medical equipment monitoring my vital signs. An IV line ran from my arm to a bag of clear fluid. I was in a quarantine chamber. I sat up slowly, my head pounding. A digital clock on the wall read 9:17 p.m. 12 hours since the hazmat team had found me. I'd lost nearly an entire day. Movement beyond the glass caught my attention. Dr. James Chen approached the observation window, a tablet in hand. He looked as immaculate as when I'd first met him, as if the chaos of the past 24 hours had never touched him. "Dr. Harrison," Chen's voice came through a speaker in the ceiling. "Good to see you awake." "Where am I?" I asked, my throat dry and painful. "Nellis Air Force Base, Medical Quarantine Wing." Chen consulted his tablet. "Your vitals are stable. No signs of physical trauma beyond minor dehydration and exhaustion." I swung my legs over the side of the bed, testing my strength. "How long will I be here?" "Standard protocol requires 30 days of observation following exposure to unknown biological agents." Chen's tone was clinical, detached. "You'll be well cared for." 30 days. A month of my life spent in this white box. What happened after the explosion? Chen tapped at his tablet before answering. "The facility has been contained. All evidence of the incident has been secured." "Evidence?" I laughed, a harsh sound in the sterile room. "Is that what you call Vincent and his family, the people from Goldfield?" Chen looked up, his face expressionless. "The official report cites a chemical leak at a private research facility. 3 researchers were killed in the initial exposure. The event has been classified." "A chemical leak," I repeated. "That's the story?" "That's the truth, as far as the public is concerned." Chen set his tablet down. "There will be no mention of infections or extraterrestrial technology." And what about me? What's my role in this truth?" Chen reached into his jacket and removed a folder, which he held up to the glass. "This is a non-disclosure agreement. Signing it means you were never at the facility. You never met Vincent Ortiz or his family. You never saw what happened there." I walked to the glass, studying the document. "And if I don't sign? That would be unwise." Chen's voice remained calm, but his eyes hardened. "The agreement comes with a position at Walter Reed Medical Center, along with a substantial increase in salary. Consider it compensation for your inconvenience." "Inconvenience?" I leaned against the glass. "People died, Chen. Captain Mitchell and her team fought to the end. Vincent sacrificed himself to stop the infection. And you call it an inconvenience?" "Captain Mitchell and her team fulfilled their duty," Chen said, unmoved, "as did Vincent Ortiz in his way." I pressed my palm against the cool glass. "Were there any other survivors? From the facility? From Goldfield?" Chen tucked the folder back into his jacket. "You are the only one, Dr. Harrison. The whole town, all those people." I couldn't keep the horror from my voice. "Goldfield has been evacuated and quarantined under the pretense of a toxic spill." Chen straightened his glasses. "The situation is under control." I thought back to Vincent's warnings, his explanation of how the infection spread. Vincent said there were spores in the ventilation system. The explosion could have dispersed them further. How do you know it's contained? Something flashed across Chen's face, a momentary crack in his professional mask. Doubt? Fear? It was gone too quickly to read. Protocols are in place, he said, his voice slightly too rigid. All personnel involved in the cleanup operation are under observation. All biological material was sterilized. But his eyes told a different story. There was uncertainty there, a shadow of the same fear I'd seen in Captain Mitchell before the end. I'll return tomorrow with the agreement, Chen said, picking up his tablet. I suggest you use the time to consider your future, Dr. Harrison. As he turned to leave, I called after him. Chen, the infection. It changes people slowly at first. Vincent said the early symptoms were subtle. You should check everyone who was at that facility, everyone who came in contact with... Good night, Dr. Harrison. Chen walked away without looking back, his footsteps echoing down the corridor. I returned to the bed, suddenly tired despite my hours of unconsciousness. As I sat down, I rubbed at my forearm, feeling a strange itch beneath the skin. I glanced down, then froze. There, just below my elbow, was a small green mark. Barely visible, it might have been mistaken for a bruise or a shadow, except it pulsed in perfect rhythm with my heartbeat.